I wonder how many of us growing up in Europe imagined this continent would become somewhere unsafe for us in our lifetimes. Far less that it would have been deliberately made unsafe for us by our supposed leaders. Obviously, a lot of us learned at school and elsewhere about all the blood spilled over centuries on European soil. We knew that for hundreds of years, petty tyrants spilled the blood of their people in ruthless, careless pursuit of wealth and territory. We knew that in the 20th century, it all came to a head not once but twice in World Wars I and II. So we knew about all the blood and horror, about the evils of communism and of communism's fraternal twin, fascism. We knew all about it, what we were told about the Holocaust, about Baba Yar. We knew about all that, Cold War, the Gulag Archipelago, attendant horrors like the Pitești experiment. If you haven't heard of Pitești, look it up. Too many horrors to list. We knew all that, and my generation was taught never to forget. And yet here we are now, in the same old Europe, and after all that happened and all we were taught about all that happened, the place feels unsafe for me and mine. In the Europe where, as I remember it from school days, we were told to speak up when we saw the smoke, the warning signs of totalitarianism, of the casual disregard of freedom, of the casual disregard of human life. In that same Europe, the same old totalitarians are back. And that Europe feels dangerous now, dangerous again. In Germany, that same Germany from which we were told came the lessons of Nazism, of Holocaust, the police are kicking in doors again. They're kicking in doors in pursuit of people who are telling the truth or just expressing opinions. But the truth and opinions the German government, subject to the globalists of the European Union, doesn't want to hear. Europe is flooded with migrants. It's not them to blame. They've been moved like pieces on a board. In many cases, their homelands have been destroyed by decades of US foreign policy, leaving them few options. In any event, they're on the move and taking up residence in Europe, because to have them in Europe en masse, disrupting, by their very presence, civilizations and cultures that were millennia in the making, to have them here, washing away in a few years the achievements of millennia, the identities shaped by millennia, to have them here washing away in mere moments Christianity, indigenous white populations, languages, traditions, norms, ancient cultures that endured centuries of war and other bloodshed. Because to have them here replacing what was here before is the absolute undeniable objectives of those who would burn Europe to the ground to rule over the ashes.
Using the internet without a VPN, a virtual private network, is a bit like taking to the road without car insurance. All it takes is one unlucky moment to cost you a lot of cash. This video's sponsor is Private Internet Access. They are the VPN to help keep you safe. Click the link in the description below to find out why over 30 million people have downloaded PIA to protect themselves online. A virtual private network is an app that hides your IP address and helps keep your data private. When you're browsing the internet at home, you give up a large amount of data to businesses, to shops, and indeed to social media giants too. Hackers have the ability to steal your personal data with ease, including sensitive information such as passwords, keystrokes, and even your personal photos. Private Internet Access helps protect your personal data by encrypting your internet connection to keep your data out of the hands of cyber criminals. And it's not just hackers either to be concerned about. Information can be censored too. When Canada passed their C-18 bill, social media giants decided to ban news content on their platforms. But PIA can protect your ability to consume the news and content you love. Private Internet Access is available for Windows users, Mac OS, Android, Linux, iOS, and you can use one PIA subscription to protect an unlimited amount of devices. And we've got a huge GB News discount for you too. Click the link in this video's description and you'll get a massive 83% off PIA. That's under £2 a month, the price of a coffee, and you'll get an extra 4 months completely free on top. Also, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee too. Visit piavpn.com/GB News to start protecting yourself digitally today.
Because to see an end to the sovereign peoples of Europe has been the whole point of the globalist project. This is no accident. This is the intention. The migrants are the tools being used to accomplish the task. But we would do much better to ask who ordered the tools, who is using the tools. And so now, after all of it, all the millennia, all the blood, and after just 2 or 3 generations of comparative peace, Europe is a place that has been rendered unsafe for those who were naive and trusting enough to imagine it would always be theirs. The police are kicking in doors to take away people who have voiced unwanted opinions. Censorship legislation is everywhere enacted in a bid to shut us up. All of this has been done to Europe deliberately, in a few short years, by a handful of charlatans. I count Britain into this Europe, and our fate here has been charted by more of the same charlatans, sock puppets, mouthing words spoken through them by others we do not know. Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer, the whole sordid lot of them, utterly without integrity or principle or honour or character. And on mainland Europe, there's more, the likes of Olaf Scholz, Emmanuel Macron, and that's before we get to the wastes of skin that are the unelected, unwanted characters like Ursula von der Leyen. The dreadful, obscene menage was crystallised in a memorable moment when Christopher Huysgen, chairman of the Europe Security Conference in Munich, burst into big bubbly tears in the aftermath of US Vice President J.D. Vance's telling Europe's pitiful premiers and hangers-on that they were censorious to a man and to a woman, and thereby driving the destruction of their own houses. That rather than listen to what their people thought and wanted, they preferred to throw them in jail or otherwise silence them for holding and expressing opinions at variance with those of the blob. And so now Europe is a place that feels unsafe for the descendants of those who lived here, worked here, helped build this place, defend this place. It's not unsafe and broken just because of the millions of illegal strangers taking advantage, as well they might, of free this, that and the other, but on account of the fact the powers that be, the powers that ought not to be, have created an atmosphere in which people descended from those that have lived here for centuries, if not forever, an atmosphere in which those indigenous populations are supposed to live now in fear of those nominally, I stress, in positions of authority over their lives. Europe and Britain have been wrenched from the hands of Europeans and the British, their cultures, traditions and histories laid waste, destroyed by globalists, those who would prefer to see all nations, all senses of national identity erased and overlain with a homogeneous monoculture which means nothing to anyone. And as they say, when all else fails, they'll take you to war. Hollow men, factotums like Starmer, open their mouths for words composed by others about putting British flesh and blood in the charnel house that has been Ukraine. So discombobulated are they in their panic, in their dying as a globalist cult, they turn reflexively towards the solution that has always rescued globalists, which is war. An online headline from Zero Hedge this week had it that Denmark is set to announce massive rearmament plans. Quote, Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said her government would announce plans on Wednesday for a massive rearming of Denmark's military due to the growing threat posed by Russia. We must upgrade massively to protect Denmark and we must rearm massively to avoid war, Frederiksen told Parliament on Tuesday. She did not disclose any details or sums, but according to Danish public broadcaster DR, the government is expected to announce the creation of a 50 billion kroner fund for additional defence spending in 2025-2026. Frederiksen told Parliament the rearming would need to happen quickly amidst a difficult situation for our country, kingdom and continent. Denmark is currently experiencing the most dangerous situation in our lifetime. This is worse than during the Cold War, she said. After emergency talks in Paris over the US change in policy on the Ukraine war, Frederiksen warned that Russia is threatening all of Europe now. The war in Ukraine has been about Russia's imperial dreams, about building a bigger Russia, and I don't think they're going to stop in Ukraine, she told reporters. She warned the US against attempts to agree on a fast ceasefire that would give Russia the chance to mobilise again, attack Ukraine or another country in Europe. Since the outbreak of the war in February 2022, Danish support to Ukraine has amounted to some $7.52 billion in military support and around $741 million in civilian contributions, according to the Danish Foreign Ministry. End quote. So there you have it, I say. Propaganda, baseless scare stories. So yet more money can be milked from another population fed a diet of fear. Even now, when the truth is out there that the war in Ukraine was provoked not by Russia, but by decades of NATO expansion, still the myth is perpetuated of the Russian bogeyman. When all else fails, they take you to war, remember? When the COVID pandemic hoax ran out of steam before it got them over the line into full-bore digital imprisonment of the masses, they opted for war in Ukraine. They called it a war to save democracy in a country where there was no democracy, and now propose to have the descendants of those who fought and died to challenge Nazism stand shoulder to shoulder with Nazis, so that yet more money might be laundered through that benighted place where a freshly slaughtered million souls lie cold in the clay. Shameless is too small a word to describe the disgrace of those we are supposed to acknowledge as leaders. And yet here we are, watching the likes of Starmer and Macron embrace each other as they dream of condemning yet more young flesh to the meat grinder so that their masters might live to lie another day. I ask you, in all seriousness, who, even on their worst and weakest day, would answer the call to war of a creature like Keir Starmer? This war in Ukraine is and always has been a war for money, a war for power. And all the while, Europe and Britain have been undone and deliberately by those for whom Europe and Britain are utterly expendable. Worse than that, Europe and Britain, standing as they have, at least for a while, for freedom, have been a thorn in the side of those who would enslave humankind. No less than that is at stake here and now. Either we preserve our freedom in the face of these would-be tyrants with their Nehru jackets and crocodile tears, or we watch yet more young men herded into the meat grinder to ensure the rich stay rich and the powerful stay powerful. Europe was a safe place for a while, at least some of it, for some of us. We turned blind eyes and deaf ears while the powerful sacrificed the rest of the world. Now all of that wider world has come home to roost. Europe and Britain are in the crosshairs of destruction. The surviving collateral damage of the world are here now, and the lives of ordinary people are destroyed or turned upside down as a result. Hopefully some of the lies parroted by bought and paid for media are being exposed now. Maybe this time people will see that war in Ukraine was driven by lying propaganda, that the threat to the safety of Europe and Europeans comes not from Russia, but from the globalists here at home. Globalists in their death throes, but ready and eager to take our children down with them.